Thinking of everything we just talked about what would be a successful way to transfer the rigor and thinking to the students, thinking about what you saw in your video that you brought up as some gaps, what do you think the action steps should be?
My action steps for next week.
Yeah, or we're starting step testing, but I mean, you could potentially teach the same lesson again to a different group of students.
I would say my action steps would be implement a writing component into Excellence and On Beyond Z guided reading lessons. Allow them to do the heavy lifting before I give them the final answer. And do more higher order thinking questions and give them more wait time.
Right, so is similar to what I have. So what I have for your action step is to provide an opportunity for all students to do the heavy lifting through rigorous questions that are aligned to the bottom line by having them write first and then talk second.
Okay.
So that's your what, and you can write that down, and then we'll talk about how we'll make sure that happens.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever get a chance to look at the camera, see who's been bags of trash in the kitchen?
They're putting it in the kitchen or like back in the cafeteria? And it's happening after.
After I clean up and after I leave.
And then, so the how to do that that we'll be working on is launch the writing task by telling them what they will be writing and like the details that you want, and that'll be based in your like thinking steps.
You have to think what kind of trash it is.
And then, as students write, have an exemplar response. So you'll want to have what you want them to do, and aggressively monitor their work. And then allow students to spar with one another before beginning discussion on the question. And then, like, you'll listen and spar. I mean, you'll listen as students spar.
But the camera will tell.
So if you're thinking about that, like, I know you're saying, like, the wait time.
Yeah.
So the wait time is during the writing and, like, giving them the rigorous probes.
Yeah.
You can do those things, like, while they're actually writing, you can probe. You can actually, like, probe more around, like, when they have a discussion.
So with the sparring, I would say, Grace, please share your response. And then she would share, and then I'd say, what do you all think about her response? Amari, what are your thoughts? What would you add to that? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Is that?
Yeah, so,
Okay.
And we'll talk more about that, like, when we plan the plan for it. We're going to plan it next. But as you're thinking about allow students to spar with one another before beginning the discussion, like, you would give them a stem.
Okay.
You may say, like, I identify that if it's just about theme, I identify the theme as, and they would, like, talk to one another and, like, then, like, have them add on to what they heard from, like, my theme is similar to yours because I also had blah, blah, blah. And they can, like, spar with one another, and then they can come back to the group, and you can have them either share out what they learned from another person, or, like, what their theme is and how they may have revised it based on what they learned. And then come up with a final theme if you're, like, thinking about themes.
Okay.
So again, like, I'll read it again, and you can make sure you have your action step, the what and the how down.
Okay.
So I provide all scholars for an opportunity for the heavy lifting, and questions that align to the bottom line by having them write first, talk second. So, like, the key to that is making sure that they have the opportunity to write, then talk. And then how, like, you'll make sure you have a clear launch to the writing task. And as students write, you as a teacher you need to have an exemplar response of what you're looking for, so that helps you to aggressively monitor and take notes. And again, allowing students to spar with one another before beginning the discussion, and we can, like, add, like, what you just brought up, like, give them a stem for talking, like a sentence starter.
Okay.
And again, like, listen in as they spar.
And it's not until after they've sparred that I show them the exemplar response. I just have it
Yeah.
in mind while I'm thinking.
Yeah,
Okay.
you should have it in mind. Like, you don't want to give it away. Like, you actually want them to come up with it on their own as much as possible.
Okay.
Um,
Would you give them a chance after I show the exemplar to fix their responses to meet it, or?
yeah, I mean, I think so for, like, during a reading comp lesson, they don't have to, it's not like a clear exit ticket grade. I think that's fine. And also a lot of our guided reading lessons, especially at those two levels, kind of correspond to their whole group reading lessons. So they still have opportunities for that.
Okay.
That type of thing. So I think it's fine to have them revise it during those lessons. Just I wouldn't do it during like the whole group like exit ticket type lessons where they have like an exit ticket and grades. Like you could show them the exemplar response after the exit ticket, they just can't do it again.
Yeah.
So that came out of the.
Yeah, I just took this out of there.
All right. So now for the last part of our meeting, we're gonna launch into the plan and a little bit of practice. So I asked you to bring your lesson from last time, and
Because they have like.
we're gonna just work on like two specific parts of the right first, talk second, because the key to helping them do this successfully is to launch it effectively, because they haven't been used to writing for all responses yet.
Yeah.
And how to bring them back together to launch a discussion. So we'll
Okay.
practice those. We'll plan those two parts and practice that.
Okay. Is that something?
So,
that you wanna talk to
if I'm
the
thinking
teachers
about-
But that's why I see need to look at the camera, see who's doing
If we look at the theme,
Okay.
look your lesson on theme, I want you to plan the words you would say before having scholars write. So what are 2 to 3 things that students should know and be expected to do before they write?
Okay. So I would say I'm gonna find my third question. Okay, so my question was, what lesson did the character learn? And that's the one that I'm going to ask them to answer, so I would say, in front of you, you have a piece of paper, and I want you to think about the lesson that the character learned in the story, and I want you to race your response for me. So I want to see complete sentences. I want to see a page number referenced, a quote from the story. I want you to do it just as you would race. And then we'll come back together in about 3 minutes, and we'll listen to your responses and talk about it.
So you restated the question that you had talked about in the beginning of the lesson, so I think that was good. You told them that they needed to write a response in race. And I think to make that even more succinct, like what parts of race are you like really looking for to show that they understand the theme? And you touched on it just now, but I'm thinking of how you can say that in like a really concise way.
Okay, so I would say we're going to race our response around this prompt. You guys have been doing a really good job with the R and the A, restating the question and answering it. But I've been seeing that we need more practice on citing our evidence, so we're going to focus on remembering to write the page number, including a quote, and just being really focused on the C in race.
So tell them to be focused on the C, and I would be even more precise. Like I may tell them that I'm looking for, you've been doing a really good job of restating the question and answering the question. So you would answer your question by telling me what the theme is, but I'm also looking for you to support with that what
Okay.
you feel like the theme is by giving me, and I would say something like two key pieces of evidence from the text. That includes like either a quote or a specific event and a page number that it happens, so
Okay.
that they know like exactly what you want to see when you're monitoring.
Okay.
And then if you think about afterwards, when you bring scholars back together to launch a discussion, and we talked about this a little bit a few minutes ago, how can students learn from one another to come to a consensus of an answer around theme, since that's what we're thinking about. So if you want to like launch a discussion after they've had the opportunity to write, what would you ask them to do?
I would ask a child to share their response. I would give them time to share and then I would ask another kid, what do you think about that response? Do you think that's correct? Would you add anything to it? And I would try to start a discussion between scholars.
So I think you do want to like have a discussion. So you'll want to have the discussion first. So after they write, they should have an opportunity to do something like a turn and talk. And you talked about like giving them, you asked me like, how would you have them start talking about their writing? So you give them a sentence stem, like you're going to turn and talk to your partner. You're going to give them your definition of theme. You'll start your conversation, or partner A will start the conversation by saying, I believe the theme is whatever they think, and they should cite their answer. And then partner B can say the same thing. I think the theme is blah, blah, blah. And they can think about how their answers are like similar or different.
Okay. And since it's going to be their first time doing this, I might ask them to write down things because I want to make sure they're really like thinking and talking about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And then I would say, like you talked about, like them sharing out. So before they even get ready to share out, they need to know what they're going to share. So tell them that when we discuss, you're going to share out what was similar about either another scholar. It's like a good way to say it's like to make sure they're listening to their partner. What was similar in your answer to your partner's answer, or you can ask them how they revise their thinking based on what they talked about with the partner.
Okay.
That holds them more accountable for listening. And then give them like a time limit for the discussion. Like that's like one key piece, and you actually mentioned that too. Like I think a turn and talk, they can have like 2 minutes, a minute to 2 minutes for each person. And then again, like you talked about, like giving them the final theme. Like once you have had a rich discussion around their turn and talks and their discussion, you can have an exemplar response. And they can either like look at their response, and they can do something as simple as like a thumbs up or a thumbs down or a thumbs to the side, like if they kind of agree with it, to like support what the final, like to support the final exemplar response. Like think about how theirs matches the exemplar, and why or why not. So like I would, for the sake of time, we have a few more minutes. I would like for you to, I think we'll work first on just the launching the writing piece.
Okay.
So I'm going to have you take about 3 minutes to write down like the writing assignment. So we talked about like, what were the things that we talked about when we launched the writing? When you give them the directions, what are some things you want them to do?
When I was launching the writing, I was gonna, I didn't write that stuff down, but I know it's up here.
So you wanted
I wanted to recap the thinking steps. I wanted them to write down a statement about the theme, but I wanted to like push the C really hard, and I was gonna ask them for 2 pieces of evidence.
Yeah. So I'm going to let you script that out. So we'll take about 3 minutes to script that out.
Okay.
And then we'll practice what you would stand up and say to scholars. Is it y'all's prep time? Is it your specials? Did you just get to school? Did you just get to school?
We're doing gym.
Okay. Well, you should go to gym right now.
I'm trying to put these in the classroom.
Oh, can you just take them to the gym and put them on the stage? And then you take them to the classroom?
Yeah, you can do that.
But she's probably working.
Mm-hmm.